What's a deeply unsettling fact? Story 1. If you become an astronaut and are on the ISS when an apocalyptic asteroid hits, you could be among the last few humans left alive, with a limited oxygen supply, limited food supplies, and no external assistance in returning home or surviving. Story 2. If you're a certain distance from a nuclear explosion, you won't be killed immediately, but instead, you'll get third-degree burns throughout your entire body. This kills your nerves so fast that it's completely painless. Story 3. Sometimes I wonder just how close I've come to losing my life over the years. For example, a few years back I was leaving a friend's house party. I was about to head out the door when I realized I couldn't find my keys. It took about 3 or 4 minutes to find before I went on my way. Fast forward just a few miles down the road, and there's a huge pileup of cars and wreckage with no cops or ambulance on the scene yet. Once I got out and went to talk to some of the people involved and help out, they mentioned that the crash only happened a few minutes ago. Really makes you think. Story 4. I wouldn't call it deeply unsettling, but I'm disturbed by the fact that I only get a small amount of time to do stuff I think is worthwhile and figure out how this ant farm we live in works. But every day I have to lie down and step outside of existence for 6 to 8 hours. The world keeps going, I keep getting older, and yes, my brain is still processing things while I sleep, but I feel that this is a massive waste of time. If I don't sleep, then my mental and physical health start to decline. The process of falling asleep and waking up also disturbs the project or train of thought that was underway during the day, requiring even more time to get back on track. Meanwhile, dolphins are out here staying up 24/7, which is why they're smarter than us and will be leaving the planet first. Story 5. The entire universe outside of our galaxy could have completely disappeared over 20,000 years ago, and we still wouldn't know it yet. Our view of the universe is actually what it looked like anywhere from thousands to billions of years ago, with no way to see what it actually looks like right now. Imagine if you looked out your front window and saw your yard as it was 6 months ago, neighbor's house across the street a year ago, and houses a block or two away as they were a year ago. Also off in the distance you see glaciers from the last ice age. That's what it's like looking out at the universe. The genuinely most unsettling notion of space is that if we actually ever did discover life, as in sentient life capable of communication, not only would we be too far away to actually contact them, but they may already be extinct. Story 6. There are a huge amount of illnesses that aren't curable or even treatable. We have this idea that we go to a doctor, they find out what's wrong, and they fix us. There are many illnesses that make doctors throw their hands up because they don't even know what's causing us to be unwell, and people are often ill for years or life. Story 7. I once said hi to my neighbor, and she replied with like, hi, and then she walked 50 meters further and got hit by a car. You never know how random to people your last words will be. I wouldn't want my last words to be, add me some mayonnaise on that, darling. But then you're gonna be that weird guy who when someone says hello to, you'll always respond in an overly profound way. Hey, Jim. There's no rules to life, but I'm glad I lived it my way. Okay, Jim. Story 8. In 1983, the world came closest to a full-scale nuclear war between Russia and the US. Back then, Russia's nuclear early warning system reported that a missile had been launched from the United States, followed by up to 5 more. Stanislav Petrov, the duty officer at the command center at the time, was tasked with observing the satellite early warning network and notifying his superiors of any impending nuclear missile attack against the Soviet Union. If notification was received from the early warning systems that inbound missiles had been detected, the Soviet Union's strategy was an immediate and compulsory nuclear counterattack against the United States. Petrov dismissed the warning as a false alarm. He deducted that a first-strike nuclear attack by the United States was likely to involve hundreds of simultaneous missile launches in order to disable any Soviet means of a counterattack. His suspicion was confirmed when no missiles arrived at the proposed time of impact. Later, it was determined that the false alarms were caused by a rare alignment of sunlight on high-altitude clouds in the satellite's Molniya orbits, an error later corrected by cross-referencing a geostationary satellite. So the only reason why civilization as we know it didn't cease to exist in 1983 was the level-headed behavior of a single man. Story 9. That right now, this very moment, someone is trapped against their will, probably suffering at the hands of someone else, and wondering if anyone out there is thinking about them or remembers them. Now that's actually upsetting. Add to that the unsettling fact that there are more slaves in bondage today than at any point in human history. It is a double-edged fact because the percentage of the population that are slaves is much lower nowadays than at any time in human history. Just that there are so many humans, the small percentage of them that are slaves actually translates to the estimated between 21 million and 46 million. It is a horrible fact, and one that cannot be softened. That said, A human is still far more likely to live out a free life nowadays than at any other point in human history. Story 10. The 1961 atomic bombing accident of North Carolina. The U.S. Air Force came dramatically close to detonating an atom bomb over North Carolina that would have been 260 times more powerful than the device that devastated Hiroshima. 2 Mark 39 hydrogen bombs were accidentally dropped over Goldsboro, North Carolina, on the 23rd of January 1961. The bombs fell to Earth after a B-52 bomber broke up in midair, and one of the devices behaved precisely as a nuclear weapon was designed to behave in warfare. Its parachute opened, its trigger mechanisms engaged, and only one low-voltage switch prevented untold carnage. Of the 4 safety mechanisms designed to prevent unintended detonation, 3 failed to operate properly. When the bomb hit the ground, a firing signal was sent to the nuclear core of the device, and it was only that final, highly vulnerable switch that averted calamity. I get goosebumps every time I read about it. Story 11. The majority of modern pop hits are created by the same 2 men. Clever but also quite unsettling. Everything is a facade. A lot of the popular pop artists don't even write their own songs. And artists such as Chainsmokers use the same technique for every single song because it's addicting. 2 guys rule mainstream music because they figured out a way to create catchy music and sell it to artists who perform it. I always thought pop songs sounded repetitive, but to think the process behind it is already mechanized to such a degree, it's both interesting and horrifying. Story 12. Resistance to antibiotics is growing at such an alarming rate that they risk losing effectiveness entirely, meaning medical procedures such as C-sections, joint replacements, and chemotherapy could soon become too dangerous to perform. Unless urgent action is taken, drug-resistant infections will extinguish 10 million people a year by 2050. More than cancer currently, the reporter's authors warn. Story 13. After you die, everyone else's life just carries on. Your doctors and nurses, for example, will go home that evening to their partners and children, have dinner, maybe a beer or glass of wine, enjoy a TV show, and go to bed. And you'll be dead. As a nurse, I find this super weird. I'm actually only a student and somehow haven't had a patient die whilst I'm on yet. But even when I talk to people who are in palliative care, this crosses my mind, as well as the fact that some of these people have been alive for like 8 decades. But I might be one of the dozen or so people that they talk to. Makes me feel both privileged and terrified about my role. Story 14. We are alive at the overwhelmingly vast majority of the universe we will know as the extremely distant past. 13 billion years into something could very well make a trillion years look like a blink of an eye. If the universe was a download, it would take another 80 billion years before we get to 1% of the amount of time it takes for a very small star to go through its hydrogen. Yep, you and I are alive at the beginning. Not the middle, not the end. We are the bacteria. Edit. Very small stars can last trillions of years. Ignorant folks who think they're not ignorant, but well-educated, are griping about how our star will only last 4 billion more years. I know, there are other stars. Big ones go boom fast. Medium ones last billions of years and turn into neutron stars or brown-red dwarf stars. Tiny stars can last trillions of years, and I'm only writing what astrophysics wrote in a book about how long stars can last. Story 15. The Dunning-Kruger effect has proven that competent, intelligent people are less likely to think they know everything. On the flip side, people who don't know much think and believe they know more than they actually do. The rants and attacks on others on social media provoked me to research this phenomenon. Story 16. If you have clothes in your wardrobe and food in your fridge, you're in the richest 20% of people in the world. Something so simple would categorize you above 80% of people in the world. Story 17. Your brain initiates actions prior to your conscious awareness of them. Your perception. I will to pick up that pen to write my name. Brain. Initiate pen picking up and set the point at the place where I will begin writing. I pick up the pen. What actually happens? Brain initiates motor functions for the arm and hand. You perceive yourself making the decision to pick up the pen. Your hand and arm pick up the pen. Your sense organs and subconscious are processing very large amounts of data, but your consciousness is very limited. You don't have time to consciously be aware of everything your brain is doing. Consciousness is a filter that makes approximate sense of who you are and why you do things you do. It's not the driver's seat. It's more like a passenger. Story 18. There are some regions of the universe that we will never be able to observe because the energy of empty space is causing it to expand. And there's distances so vast that it expands faster than the speed of light. As the universe expands larger, our observable universe will become less and less dense until we become the only galaxy that's observable. But at least Andromeda will come and hang out with us. Milky Way and Andromeda, best bromance for life. Story 19. In the aftermath of 9/11, the search dogs were getting so worried in their performance in the sense that they were scared they weren't finding enough survivors. To stop them from getting too severely depressed, some of the firefighters had to go in and disguise themselves as people needing to be rescued to literally raise the dogs' morale. Story 20. Everything you see, hear, taste, smell, and touch is a hallucination. The things literally exist, but the way you perceive them is filtered through parts of your brain that filter and edit your perception in order to maintain continuity. That doesn't sound so bad, but you don't have control of those mechanisms. Your brain is editing things out right now without you noticing. The blind spot in your vision is edited out. The millions of rapid eye movements you make every day, all day, are edited out. The sound of your heart beating and the blood pumping through your veins, just all edited out. So really the difference between you and a person suffering from what we generally mean when we say hallucinations, voices in their heads, seeing things that aren't there, is that you have other people around you who corroborate them. If you were completely alone, you'd have no way to tell, and the longer you were alone, the worse you'd likely become at it. Story 21. Relative to that other thread, the U.S. government forcibly sterilized a bunch of Native American women, often without their knowledge. The more disturbing part is that it was happening through the late 1970s. Motivating factors were saving money on Native assistance programs and racial motivations. Medical students were taught that Native women were genetically inferior. Story 22. Most people alive today will end up completely forgotten after a certain amount of time. Although we have kids and keep our bloodlines going, by the time we get to the stage we are great-great-great-grandparents, we will be forgotten by even our own families, the reason they're here in the first place. Nobody matters, nobody cares enough to remember you long after you're gone, unless you're an Elvis or ironically live your life how you want to. It really doesn't matter. It's unlikely you will leave behind a legacy. It's very unlikely anyone will remember you for being polite or kind. Be what you want, when you want, and do life how you want. It really doesn't matter if nobody will remember anyway. Just play the game and have fun till the batteries die. Story 23. 1984 predicted many of the things we experience today, and that we live in an almost Orwellian society. Constant observation and monitoring by an agency that doesn't disclose its intentions. He predicted voice-to-text capabilities, missile detection, texting and email, and user experience analytics that drive a methodical system which attempts to offer you things before you even ask. Story 24. It would cost $10 billion a year to provide clean water and sanitation to the entire world. That's less than 2% of the U.S. military budget alone. Not having access to clean water and sanitation causes at least 1 million deaths per year, including 800,000 per year under the age of 5. We don't lack the ability to fix this, not by a long shot. We just lack the will. Story 25. There may actually be a second consciousness hiding in your mind, unable to communicate with the outside world, but fully aware, and maybe even with its own personality. This is more a theory than a fact, though. By the way, it takes 22 pounds of pressure to pop a Also, by the time you have reached the age of 18, you have approximately 3,200 to 3,500 weekends left in your life. Apparently, elephants consider humans adorable. Their brains release the same chemical ours does when we see a panda. They may or may not worship the moon and conduct rituals in which they wave leaves at it. This behavior has been observed for sure, but it's not clear the purpose. Bill Gates currently has more money than you will have seconds in your life. In other words, if you earn $1 per second for your entire life, by the time you die, Bill Gates' current worth will still be about 25 times greater than yours. Really says something about the length of human life. Makes me feel small. Oh, just, due to how mathematics work and due to how big the universe is, there could be an exact replica of our galaxy, solar system, planet, and even you somewhere on the other side of the observable universe, which compared to the non-observable universe is so small as to be a grain of rice next to a blue whale. You can retain consciousness for 20 seconds after being beheaded. Story 26. The media is trying to manipulate you every single day. Some more than others, but pretty much everyone is guilty about it. If your Facebook newsfeed is full of articles on a current event that is causing you to feel strong emotions, especially hate, anger, fear, or resentment, just chill out for a bit. Go for a walk out in public, and you will likely be reminded that your world isn't too bad. Story 27. Some studies in neurology suggest that there is a separate system in the brain which is responsible for decision making, and thus every action we take and what we think of as a conscious thought is actually just a passenger with no control at all. This would mean there is either a separate entity in our brain that is aware of us, yet we are not conscious of it, controlling what we think of as our actions, or several others, each responsible for separate tasks, and with a chain of command, conscious thought being the last in the chain, responsible for cataloging and analyzing information which all the others draw from when making decisions. Have you ever found yourself saying something you don't mean? Or you see a ball coming toward you and think, move, but instead stand right there and get hit? Or conversely, you find your body moving on its own during intense situations? These could actually just be cases of the illusion of control being broken. Story 28. Sci-fi fans know about the transporter issue, since your body must be destroyed before information is beamed to a planet's surface. When you step into a transporter pad, you're essentially entering a chamber, and what appears on the planet is another version of you. They'll have your memories, but you won't be them. Your life ended when you were transported. This is because there's no continuity of consciousness, which is fine. Transporters don't exist, and this is all hypothetical. But you know what else doesn't provide continuity of consciousness? Sleeping. Sure, there's dreaming, but in any sleep cycle, there's a period of time where your consciousness is turned off, dead stop. When you wake, a fresh copy of your consciousness is effectively booted from scratch. What this means is when you fall asleep, that's the last thing you'll ever do. You're turned off, and that particular instance of you will never be turned on again. The person who wakes up in the morning will have your body and your memories, but that's it. They'll think they're the same person that went to sleep, but they're not. Sleep tight. Story 29. Kind of unsettling how much personal information big companies like Google and Facebook is acquiring about us, or how smart TVs use our voice recordings to make improvements. Same with fingerprint scanners. All that information is up on their servers about you and everything you do online. Story 30. The courts ruled one can be too smart to be a police officer. If you test with an IQ of something like 110 or higher, they legally don't have to hire you, citing you would get bored and quit and waste costly training. My theory is they don't want people to question their practices. Either way, explains a lot. Story 31. People are terrified, not of the fact that the room is dark itself, but of what is in the room with them. They are scared that something is with them that they can't see, something that can hurt them or even kill them. We are innately afraid of the dark for that reason, to keep ourselves safe of whatever is lurking just out of sight. We keep the lights on before we go to bed. We inspect the rooms we're in for brief moments without knowing we are. We even keep spare flashlights and lanterns in case of a power outage. We may not all have a severe phobia of the dark, but we are all subconsciously scared of what can be in the dark. How can you be certain you're alone when you sleep?